Swashbucklers, you're listening to Under the Crossbones, episode number 168. My name is Phil Johnson. I am the captain of this ship. I don't know, captain's a strong word. I'm the quartermaster of, I'm not sure, but quartermaster. Purser. I'm the ship's purser. Hi, I'm Gopher, your ship's purser. I'll be here to the Crossbones. Soon we'll be pillaging in your town, the Crossbones. Then we'll make off with all of your cows. Cows? I don't know. We're rustling. We're cattle rustling pirates. Yeah! Arr. Hi, hey, welcome to the show. I'm just back from a vacation. Can you tell? Here we are, episode number 168. Fun fact about the number 168. There are 168 hours in a week. And guess what? I could use 170. I really could use a couple of more hours. But that's how many we got. And they're not making any more of them. So there you go. Also, 168 in Chinese is slang for, it's a slang thing for good luck. Because, they love the good luck numbers and things in the Chinese culture, let me tell you. But this one, when it's spoken in Chinese, Yi Lu Ba, that's 168, sounds very similar to Yi Lu Fa, which means one road of posterity. Prosperity, not posterity, prosperity. And so the number 168 means good luck and good fortune. So we're going to have some of that today. I'm sure I pronounced those wrong. If my girlfriend hears this, she's absolutely going to tell me I pronounced them wrong because she loves to do that. She'll tell me, she'll go, say this Chinese phrase, and then she'll say it. And then I say it, and she goes, no, I don't even understand what you're saying. So she tells me to pronounce things and then berates me when I can't speak Chinese correctly. Because I'm not Chinese, and she is, and that's the way it works. So, anyway, my guest on the show today, very interesting show today, is Charles Dean Beeker. He's the director for the Center of Underwater Science at the University of Indiana, the Bloomington campus specifically, and he is a shipwreck conservationist. We've been wanting to hear a little bit about Captain Kidd's ship, the Key Dog Merchant, right? We're going to hear about that today because he's the guy in charge of it. Heck yeah. And we're going to talk about also the Frolic, which is a California gold rush era shipwreck found off the Mendocino coast that has a real interesting story to it. So but the most interesting thing is he is a shipwreck conservationist. He's not a treasure hunter. He's not into bringing things up to the surface like most of the other archaeologists we've talked to. He is all about conserving these sites underneath the water and turning them into historical monuments, essentially. So we're going to talk about the process of what makes a historical monument and how does that happen and all that. We're going to talk about these shipwrecks, including the Key Dog Merchant, Kidd's ship, and lots of good stuff in this one. This is a really interesting talk, and you are going to dig it. So I did take a little vacation, an actual vacation. I didn't even take my guitar. I did not tell a joke in any room with a microphone in front of an audience. Nothing. Just me and my girl. Headed up to Portland, Oregon for a weekend of just blowing off some steam and doing a whole lot of sleeping in, which we did. And shopping for her, because there's always got to be shopping, especially in a state with no sales tax. But what we did is we drove out to the Oregon coast on Saturday. That was fantastic. I've been out there lots of times. She'd never been. But we went to the Tillamook Cheese Factory, where they have a little factory tour, and you can eat some cheese, and of course they have things to buy, and that was cool. I'm a cheese nut. She likes factory tours. It was all good. It was free. That's an afternoon of free entertainment that we had there. So if you're ever in Tillamook, Oregon, hit the cheese factory, man. The entire town is built on the cheese factory, it appears. And there's that. And then from there, it's only a quick little half-hour drive, maybe out to the coast, where you can look at waves and things like that. And here's the thing. The Oregon coast has three main exports, lumber, cheese, and motivational, quote, poster backgrounds, apparently. I took some pictures, just snappy snap pictures, and they're beautiful pictures of the Oregon coast. And if you want to see them, go to my Instagram. They're on there, Instagram.com/PhilJohnsonComedy. You can see the pictures there that I took there. But anyway, Oregon coast, beautiful. It's my favorite driving in the whole entire country that I've been to, and it's fantastic. So if you ever have a chance, do that. But back on the road this week, and in fact, I'll be headed back up there very, very soon. Here's the list of shows coming up. December the 6th, that's this Thursday, I'll be at Free Wheel Brewing in Redwood City, California. December the 9th, I'll be headlining a Toys for Tots benefit at P.F. Chang's in Walnut Creek, California. Yeah, never thought I'd be playing at P.F. Chang's, but it's for a good cause. We're raising money. We're collecting toys for Tots. They do good stuff. December the 12th, I'll be back in Oregon at the Mill Casino in Coos Bay, Oregon, headlining 2 shows that night. December the 13th, headlining at the Mount Shasta Vets Club in Mount Shasta, California. December 14 and 15, these are all headline shows. December 14 and 15, Chadwick's in Medford, Oregon. December 16th, I'll be at the Slide Inn in Portland, Oregon. December 18th, Collector's Choice, Snohomish, Washington. December 19th, Seven Cedars Casino in Sequim, Washington. It's spelled Sequim, but they pronounce it Sequim because they're weird people. And December the 21st, the Seven Nightclub in Bend, Oregon. And the last show of the year, December the 28th, will be at the Vikings Clubhouse in Hayward, California. So, it's going to be a long couple of weeks. I got a lot going on, but there's more stuff coming up. Check the tour dates, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Florida, it's all on there. Go to underthecrossbones.com, click on the tour dates button, and you can check that all out. But it's nice. It was cold up in Portland. It's a little nicer here in California, which is cool because it's got to get back to some warm weather so I can wear my Parada clothing. Yeah, we're sponsored today by Parada Clothing, of course. Their brand new website is a utopia of pirate shirts and hats and clothing, swimwear, all more. So you can't wear the pirate swimwear in Portland in December. It's chilly and wet. But they've got it, and it's all pirate-themed stuff, and it's great. It's perfect for your next Caribbean cruise, or if you're headed out to the Florida Keys, you're going to escape the snow and the cold, or wherever you are, go somewhere warm. Get your Parada clothing gear. They add new stuff weekly, so there's always new things you can check out. Go check it out now. ParadaClothing.com. And be sure to click on the ship wheel on the website to get in on Blackbeard's treasure hunt. So again, that is ParadaClothing.com. And if you want a discount, it's super easy. All you got to do, grab your phone, text the word pirate to 21000. Text the word pirate to 21000, and they'll send you a discount just like that. Just for asking. So again, that is ParadaClothing.com. If you're enjoying the show, come join us on Facebook, Facebook.com/UnderTheCrossbones. And Twitter, we're at UnderCrossbones, no the. And make sure you're subscribed, whatever little podcasty, listening, appy thing that you're listening to right now. Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Slacker, Spotify. We're everywhere. You can get them everywhere. By the way, I don't pay attention to podcast charts and things like that too much because we're in a very niche topic here. This is not a mainstream kind of topic, but apparently we did crack the history podcasts chart on Apple Podcasts Australia. So you want to talk niche. In the history, if you go to Australia and you'll look at iTunes and the history podcast thing, we're number 392 or something. But whatever, we cracked the chart. I think a couple weeks ago we were also on a history podcast chart for Apple Podcasts in Iceland, I think. But there we were like number 14, or 19 or something like that. So it's even better. But anyway, I appreciate all you guys out there listening because that's cool. The charts are bonus. I just like to hear you guys' feedback on the show and all that kind of good stuff. Of course, all the show notes for this episode will be at underthecrossbones.com/168. All right, so what say we do it? What say we get into my talk with Charles Dean Beeker? So like I said, we're going to talk shipwrecks, but conserving shipwrecks. It's a little bit different angle that we've not heard about on this show very much. He is from the University of Indiana School of Center for Underwater Science. That's it. And he's the head of the department, and he is doing some really cool, interesting things. We're going to talk Captain Kidd's ship, the Key Dog Merchant. We're going to talk the Frolic, the Gold Rush ship. We're going to talk about the Pomona, which was a passenger steamship. There's all sorts of great stuff in this one, so check it out. Here is my interview with Charles Dean Beeker. Ooh, quick note, I forgot to tell you, there's some background noise during this interview. Charles was doing this interview from his lab, and that is his lab students doing their conservation-y work in the background. So the noise you hear is an actual lab at work, and that's what it is. All right, so here's my talk with Charles Dean Beeker. Your title is Director for the Center of Underwater Science at the School of Public Health in Bloomington, Indiana, University of Indiana. But that seems like a very limiting title for what you do. So how do you describe to people what you do?
Well, I guess I'm certainly an underwater archaeologist, but I happen to be a specialist in marine protected areas related to shipwrecks, and I've been working on them for many years, including, the pirate site, the Captain Kidd site. A lot of work in Florida, California, and Caribbean. So underwater archaeologist with interest in protecting these resources as permanent marine protected areas is kind of what I do.
Okay, and I think that's sort of a key idea there, because most of the underwater archaeologists that I've talked to on this show are intent on bringing things back up to the surface, and you are not. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, not only we are well, I guess I'd start with one of the early underwater archaeologists, Keith Muckelroy, which unfortunately died in the 70s, but I never forget his discussion of, as underwater archaeologists, dig we must. Then he would say, but must we dig?
Okay.
The concept is, do we have to really bring it all up to the surface just because we're capable of doing this, getting access to these sites in really the 60s, 70s, and 80s when scuba became popular? So my approach on this all along has been, let's try and leave as much as we can in situ. Now, I'm not talking about leaving, treasure, cargoes underwater and foolish, but when it comes to cannons and anchors and typical shipwrecks that people encounter, I'm interested in seeing minimal excavation, diagnostics brought up, but after that, the site should be protected as best as possible the way it is.
Okay. Why, I think, is the question there.
Well, let's go to the Captain Kidd site. Here's a site that first I was asked to look at it by the Dominican government. There were treasure hunters from America that had active permits to look for the site, and their approach was, and I've seen their proposal, was to find the shipwreck of Captain Kidd, bring it to the surface, split 50-50 with the government, the cannons and anchors and whatever they found, suppose if they could find treasure or whatever. And, the site would be up and gone. Our approach on the same shipwreck, when I was asked to look, when their money ran out, the company went defunct in California, they lost their assets in the Dominican Republic and just walked away from it all. I was asked to look at a site which I thought might be their site they were looking for. And I told the government, well, if we do this, I don't want to bring it up. I want to prove what it is, but then turn it into a permanent snorkeling, diving park site for the future. Mm-hmm. So we brought up, there's 26 cannons. You can sell a Captain Kidd cannon for a lot of money. I'm not in the business of selling. But we brought up one cannon for diagnostic purposes, conserved it over a 4-year period, then brought it back to their government. We brought up diagnostic ballast stones, which told us that the site was from the stones themselves are from India, proven through a geochemical analysis. We brought up wood samples that was Tectona grandis, teak wood, which was only indigenous to Malaysia, to India, Surat, India at the time. And then the actual construction of the ship that we could document under a National Geographic funding proved that it was a type of vessel that was uniquely constructed in the 17th century in Surat, India. And my research took me to India, the shipbuilding yards, where they still have a few of these vessels today being constructed with similar technique. So once we know we've got teak wood, we've got ballast stones, we got the cannon, we got diagnostic ceramics and pieces, the rest of the site then is turned into an underwater park or preserve. So today you can go to the Caribbean and actually see an academically studied and proven pirate ship. Where else can you do that?
Can you go a little bit deeper into how those elements tell you that it's William Kidd's ship, which, by the way, I don't know how to pronounce. How do you pronounce the name of that ship?
Queda Merchant.
Queda Merchant. Okay, I was pretty close.
Queda Merchant, and we've had this scholarly debate. I've given presentations in Armenia that own the ship, and Queda is the correct pronunciation.
Okay, so how do those elements that you talked about then provide some sort of proof that that was his ship?
Well, how do you do that? There are thousands of shipwrecks just around Dominican Republic itself. So, sure. First thing we do is we look at the type of cannons. We can put them in the 17th century, early 18th century by its construction technique. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't enough, but the stacked cannons in the cargo hold were indicative of a ship that had lost its deployed cannons and had been scuttled with the cargo cannons and anchors below. Captain Kidd's testimony said he had 14 or 15 anchors in the hold, and he had 20-some cannon in the hold. Well, we got 26 cannon. We got a whole series of anchors protruding out from underneath the cannon. So that started us into morphological concept that this looks like the same ship. But it's only through the geochemical analysis of the riverine rock called a ballast stone that's on board. And ships of this time period from Columbus right up through to the Revolutionary War had riverine heavy basalt rocks. And I had hoped, and I've done this on other sites, that you could use these for sourcing. Where did these rocks come from?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they came from geochemically absolutely identified as from an obscure shipwreck in the Caribbean. We can prove these rocks came from a riverine system of Surat, India, where kids said the ship was built. So, we got rocks in the Caribbean that came from India on a 1699 ship site.
Okay.
So that was one. And the second was the teak wood. And Tectona Grandis was not in the Caribbean. It wasn't in Europe. It was only Malaysia to West India. So the analysis of the wood samples that we brought up from the actual site, small samples were teak. And then finally, Kidd himself said that the ship was built with all her seams rabbited. Now, as an archaeologist, that's very unusual. Kidd recognized it as unusual. That's not how we build ships in Europe. That's not how any of the vessels from Columbus era right up through till 1699 are built, except in West India, they were building teak ships, gluing them together and nailing. And I came across references to a Joseph Splinter, 1756, is describing this shipbuilding of like making a tabletop, gluing your two parts of the hull together.
Okay.
We don't do that. We put caulking in between. So those three things absolutely confirm it's Kata Merchant. And I took that evidence, even presented it to the National Academy of Sciences of Armenia, because it was an Armenian vessel. And, all the scholars, we agree. We got it. Well,
nice.
No bell with a name, but we got the evidence, the science.
Right. That bell with the name always seems like sort of the holy grail of all of those.
Well, that's what you'd like to find. But,
that's great. So you're bringing up pieces of it just for data and conservancy, and then leaving the rest of it there. And then what does that site become? Can people go visit it? Is that the plan, or what?
Well, yeah. So now you've got a site that was formerly being treasure hunted, that's been proven to be the Kata Merchant, Captain Kidd's ship, and the unique type of construction to me is just as exciting as the fact Captain Kidd, captured this ship. But it's good pirate history. But now we've enhanced the site. We put a historic marker buoy on it to drill in and place a spar buoy that identifies it as a historic site. We've put a dedication plaque on the site. We're proud of Indiana limestone that holds a bronze plaque that identifies that it's a protected area and that it's the Kata Merchant, and a little history in Spanish since it's in Dominican Republic. We are try and maintain, it's open ocean, but it's maintained moorings so that you don't have to drop anchor on the site. And we dedicated in 2011 as a living museum with USAID funding to say that not only is it a historic shipwreck, but it's actually a site that has equilibrium with the environment. There are beautiful corals around it. There's a nearby ledge that drops down to 100 feet. So it's a snorkel scuba diving site today that is permanently a park and no longer will be treasure hunted.
I see. Okay. And do you have to do anything over time to maintain it, or do you let sort of nature take its course on that wreck?
Well, the Dominican government, only place poorer would be Haiti, which has no government according to people I talk with. Dominican is trying, but they have no park rangers. They have no capability of maintaining sites like this. So, we made parks in Florida. And for the first several years, we'd go back and maintain those sites until the state of Florida got teams together to take care of that. On 1733, Spanish galleons in the Florida Keys turned into living museums. Okay. In this case, we go back annually and we attempt to document any changes we can. We're doing what's called three-dimensional photogrammetry, so we can look at the site in great detail. We put a new historic marker buoy on it. We put a new mooring buoy on it. We try and maintain the site. It is a windward area. It's not always diveable or usable because of its location, but it's the actual location. But then we've taken other sites that were treasure hunted in the Dominican Republic, most notably the 1724 Guadalupe Underwater Archaeological Preserve. And there we took cannons and anchors that were brought up 40 years prior that were not conserved in terrible condition
Mm-hmm.
and placed them on a strategic reef zone and made an underwater park, a living museum out of treasure hunted artifacts. So
Okay.
that site's, diveable pretty much year round. It's one of the most dived sites in their country.
That's interesting. So when you're putting artifacts back under the water, it seems like it would be a different process than, say, setting up your average land-based museum exhibit with here's, a very ordered sort of setup and here's some little signs about what it is. How do you go about then designing what that underwater museum is going to look like with those artifacts?
Those are very good questions. And the key is it is a museum exhibit. So we start with authentic artifacts. In the case of these artifacts, every one of these were cannons in poor condition after 40 years of literally sitting on land with all the salts and exfoliation of the wrought iron.
Uh-huh.
You take those same cannons, though, and you put them in the ocean, and in a matter of a few years, they're now beautifully covered with corals. They've become substrate, so you've got 7 cannons, a large anchor, original ceramic pieces, cannonballs, wrought iron that we've placed on a small exhibit as a living museum, acknowledging that the biological growth in the site is important.
Sure.
And it's then we put a plaque down, we put a buoy in, we put boat tie up, we make underwater guides that are both in Spanish and in English. So we've made a museum exhibit in the ocean, which to me is the proper place to put artifacts that have not been properly conserved.
When you started diving and shipwreck diving and things like that, were you of a different ilk of diver and treasure hunter, and had a come to Jesus moment, or did you start with this sort of frame of reference with it?
Well, I began diving in the 1960s,
Okay.
so I'm kind of the second round of diving. And one of the first books on diving I read, besides reading Silent World by Cousteau, was Philippe Dion's discussion of diving the Mediterranean. I remember the quote he had about the sea, Mediterranean. The sea is an underwater museum awaiting its visitors.
Okay.
And that really struck me. And as I began diving, seeing shipwrecks, in the 70s, going to sites in the Great Lakes and seeing they were heavily impacted and destroyed because of this new access by scuba, there's a natural intrigue for people who want to dive on a shipwreck. So I, like everybody else, wanted to get a brass porthole, bring up objects, because that's what we thought we did.
Right.
Now that ethics changed, and in the 1980s, I became involved with federal law that helped protect the sites, helped establish a park in the Florida Keys on the Spanish galleon, and again in 1733 galleon, the San Pedro, we opened up in 1989. And you see that these sites are finite. These sites are heavily destroyed by either salvage efforts, by hobby collectors, by looters. And that ethic to me really struck me as if we're going to protect these sites, we have to be proactive. So I've worked with the state of California and Florida to create underwater shipwreck parks as marine protected areas. And in this case, now we're working in the Caribbean to do the same thing.
Okay.
Would you rather see Captain Kidd on exhibit in Key West, the cannons and all, or would you rather go see the actual site and snorkel it? To me, it's protecting it for the next 300 years is what's important.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So are you originally from the Midwest, the Indiana area there? Where are you from? No,
I'm Midwesterner, born in Michigan and spent my time here in the Midwest and been working with Indiana University. We started the underwater science program in 1992 and became much more active in research on these cultural resources underwater, both prehistoric and historic sites.
Okay. So then your early diving experience, I assume, was in the Great Lakes mostly? Quarries,
Great Lakes. Spent time in the Florida Keys. I was lucky to be diving the Keys in 66. Remember one of my buddies was talking about going to the Spanish galleons in those days, being treasure hunted, and you could swim through the ribs of the ships. Well, that didn't last long. Within a few years, those exposed ribs have all eroded away, and I find myself in the 1980s helping to document those sites and creating parks or national register nominations. Because private consumption of these sites, we all want to find a treasure ship. But as an archaeologist, we really want to make sure that we can find and study these sites and not do any more damage than necessary.
Yeah.
To me, that's paramount. That we don't, just because we have access doesn't mean we have to bring it up.
Right. I see. So Can you tell me about the Frolic? Because being I'm here in California, we don't often get a whole lot of good shipwreck stories out here, but yours sounds pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, I've worked on extensively on several sites in California for state parks. The Frolic being one. 1850, the Frolics coming from started with getting goods out of China. Had 26,000 pieces of china on board, along with other goods coming into trying to get to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Little bit too far north, and there's some scholarly debate whether it was. I think it was an accidental run into the coast. You've been in the area, it's rugged coastlines, and you're deep ocean, Pacific. All of a sudden, you're on a cliff.
Sure.
The site is in a heavy wash zone area, difficult to access for diving. You have to select your days. We know the Pomo Indians utilize some of the china and literally were making arrowheads out of them.
Okay.
Napping the chinaware. Ultimately, this is in state purview, so we took a look and did some minimal excavation and brought up some of the ballast and some remnant pieces of china. San Francisco Maritime Museum has a lot of objects from the Frolic. State of California and cannon, one of the cannons from the site, Indiana University conserved that. Had been brought up years earlier, but rather than placing it back, we deemed it could be protected. We spent 4 years conserving it, and it's now on exhibit in California at the Point Cabrillo Lighthouse. So the site's not necessarily a scuba diving site because it's just so rough.
Right.
But it's certainly an important part of California history, going along with the gold rush and the goods coming into San Francisco and the beginning of the China trade and the China coming in to help with later with the railroad system. So it's a very important site.
Yeah, and that's certainly 1850, an important period in California history all the way around for a whole bunch of reasons. But it said I had read that ship sinking there tapped into, it sort of opened up the commerce in that part of Northern California. So Mendocino, where it is, I guess, is roughly 100 miles north of San Francisco or so. So it's way up there in the boonies. How did that shipwreck contribute to that new economy in that part of the state?
Well, obviously you had the gold rush era occurring, and what people were looking for is building materials, and in this case, bringing goods from China.
Okay.
But the Frolic wreck event, when people went to work on the Frolic, out of the San Francisco area, noted the redwoods, and that really began the big rush of building the dog holes all up and down the coast, and the lumber chutes, and bringing in all the redwoods into Sacramento. San Francisco first, and you can take boats at that time all the way, still get up to Sacramento. The big earthquake, San Francisco after that, another big rush of lumber coming in after the earthquake and fires of San Francisco in 1906. The Frolic contributed as a reason why people went north just below Mendocino and ran into the redwoods and began seeing that they could make quite a haul on lumber for the construction that was going on with the buildings of San Francisco all the way to Sacramento.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So they got there and went, hey, why haven't we been here before? This is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And then years later, you've got, we worked on the Pomona that wrecked on Fort Ross. Fort Ross State Park is the southernmost extension of the Russian settlement in North America.
Okay.
So 1804, that was being utilized, and then 1907, it becomes a state park. And then here comes the Pomona wrecks into is now a state park, which was a steamship, but it too was running up and down the coast carrying goods and going right by these lumber chutes. So that was a huge economy of redwood forest and people transported from San Francisco up to, in this case, Seattle, on board a passenger steamer vessel, which now is also, we put it on the National Register, and it's now protected by California State Parks.
Okay,
Fort
interesting.
Ross.
Fort Ross. Which part of the state is Fort Ross in? Because I'm not familiar.
North of San Francisco, about halfway up to the Frolic. Fort Ross is a state park that is, again, it's known for its Russian settlement and the fort that was there, but it now also is featuring some of the historic shipwrecks that are right off its shoreline.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I'll have to go visit. I drive through that area all the time and somehow never knew it was there. That's always good to know.
It's worth a stop.
Yeah, for sure.
You'll see a lot of our artifacts on exhibit there, and they're featuring. I was just out there a few months ago. They're starting to feature a new exhibit they're putting together on the Pomona.
Okay, cool. I'll probably be through there in a couple weeks, so I'm going to go check that out. So tell me a little bit. So the Register of National Historic Places, I've always thought is very interesting. Every time I see a plaque, I will stop and read it. And tell me about the process of nominating something for that.
Well, that's a very good question. The National Register of Historic Places is really designed for unique buildings, construction. I like to talk about, George Washington slept here, Abraham Lincoln's cabin, all this, but applied to shipwrecks is relatively new. And as a matter of fact, we're one of the first to nominate and then successfully get federal permits to place a historic plaque on a shipwreck that we put on the National Register of Historic Places. There are not very many. There are less than 200 U.S. wide, but those that are on there represent some of the best shipwrecks that we have to offer. Indiana, we only have one. Our Muskegon, California, we put the Pomona on the National Register of Historic Places as an important site. So it is a Department of Interior listing of places that have what we call archaeological significance, defined by criteria. Again, uniqueness of design, its association with world history, its potential to yield history or prehistory in the future. And it's a laborious process. It's a lot of work to put the documents together and get it through the state first to approve it, and then it goes to the federal Department of Interior, National Park Service to approve. And if you are successful, then you're permanently on the list.
Okay.
To me, it just adds a level of determining the importance of the site by if it's either eligible for, we like to say, or it is on the National Register. It means that it's a significant site that's worth protecting.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of documentation and proof do you have to send or give them to show that has that historical?
Well, one of the primary things you have to do is a proper current survey to show site integrity.
Okay.
So you have to go to the Pomona. You have to do site plans of it. You have to show there's enough there representative of that ship to warrant being listed on the National Register. And along with that site plan and site report of the active current status of the site to determine what we say integrity of the site is, then you have to all do a laborious amount of work on determining which criteria of the four or more you're going to nominate it for, and then justifying that nomination. So in the case of the Pomona, its uniqueness of style of ship. This is a passenger ferry boat. We have one in Indiana. It's very similar to the National Register. It's a vessel that was steel hulled with wooden superstructure, triple expansion steam engine on board, single propeller screw that for about 20 years was the ship of the line, but there are very few examples that we can show, none really above water. They're all shipwrecks now. So that was our reason for placing on the National Register, and the fact that we're trying to open it up for public access to show that it's important enough that if you're diving it, that it's protected, don't loot it, don't be picking up artifacts and taking off brass portholes and so on.
Right. Now, is there anybody that can police that, please don't loot this kind of thing? Or is it just an honor system?
Well, it's both. You're talking compliance and enforcement, and that's a real important component. I'm a strong advocate that peer pressure and is part of the process, where you put a buoy on it, says it's historic, you put a plaque on it, they recognize the historic significance, a mooring system on the site, you make underwater interpretive slates for it. Then the general public understands when they go there, this is a protected area, whether you have a park ranger there with enforcement writing tickets or not. But it's also important to have sites that have monitoring. In this case, Pomona is just offshore of the state park on land, so you have both underwater and land components, and people can see who's diving out there. If you start dragging a big porthole or anchors or things off of it, you're gonna have an enforcement issue.
Yeah.
But to me, it's most important to not just ignore it. A lot of archaeologists, let's go to Captain Kidd again. Just don't tell anybody where it is, and maybe it'll be okay. I take the approach, let's totally enhance the site, make it accessible, and let people know it's important. And that in itself is a management strategy for protection for the future.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that can make sense. So with a lot of underwater archaeologists, the supreme moment is finding that thing and bringing it back up to the surface. That's like the happiest moment of the dive. And so since you're not doing that, you're not bringing things back up to the surface per se, what is your favorite moment of those projects?
Well, we can look at the objects underwater. You take away the water, it's just an artifact.
Right.
So, I don't need to bring up components of a triple expansion steam engine on the Pomona in order to be able to say it's got a triple expansion steam engine, which is important. If I want to see one, I can go to Smithsonian and see their complete engine that's sitting on exhibit in the Natural History Museum.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of recovery; it's a matter of recovering the data.
I see.
Photographs, illustrations, and now 3D modeling we're doing. These are ways to document what's underwater without the need to bring it up and put it on out of context.
Okay.
And that's really the problem you've got is you can imagine all these artifacts that are somebody's collection that you look at and you're saying, well, where did this come from? Well, I got it out in the water, I think, on this site. Where did this come from? Well, it's on a different site. Well, they're together now, and they're not the same site. They might be 100 years, 200 years apart. So out of context, they lose all value as an archaeologist. Once they're brought up and not documented where they came from, then we have no way of knowing. It's just a collection of objects that has no context.
Okay. I like that because I've always thought that, okay, here's a thing in a museum that's interesting, but being in the place where that thing was always more interesting to me.
I'm with you 100%.
Nice. Interesting. So what are you working on now?
Several sites. I'll be in Dominican Republic next Monday. We're working, we're going to continue to work the Captain Kidd and the living museums that we've established, but we're working on some new sites in the area of Punta Cana. There's an early 1500s, 1540 to 1555 shipwreck that is one of 20 that are known worldwide in this time period.
Okay.
Very few. Important, maybe 12 in the Americas. So that site was a treasure hunt, lots of pewter taken and sold. Now we're looking at it as, forget about the cargo, let's talk about the ship construction, let's talk about the armament on board, let's talk about the personal effects. Let's look at it as a site that in the future should be protected as a snorkeling, scuba diving site and not brought up and sold.
Okay.
So that's a project. We're working in our state of Indiana on a couple of our historic shipwrecks with some Indiana DNR. We're excited about that. We're continuing to do some work in California, doing some orthomosaics with them on just last summer, some work that one of my colleagues worked on with doing full site plans of the sites we worked on in the past with new technology in the 21st century. So
okay,
we're pretty active.
Nice. Is there a place online where people can keep up with some of your projects and see what you're doing?
Yes, we have our Indiana University Center for Underwater Science, and we have a pretty active website that shows our past work back into the early 90s and right up to what we're working on now.
Okay, great. I'll dig that link up. I'll put it in the show notes so everybody can check it out. Well, Charles, this has been fantastic. I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, and we've been trying to do this for a while, so I appreciate you coming on the show.
Great. Well, I hope it's useful for you, and when you get something out, point me to the link.
We definitely will. Thanks. And there it is, friends. That is my talk with Charles Dean Beeker from the University of Indiana Underwater Science. I can't say University of Indiana. It's all there. If you want to go check out their website, go to Underwater Science, all one word, .indiana.edu. That's underwaterscience.indiana.edu. And of course, that link will be in the show notes for underthecrossbones.com/168. That's this episode. Did you learn something new that you didn't know before? Did you hear something you wanted to jump in on the conversation with? Come talk to us over on Facebook, underthecrossbones.com. Or no, facebook.com/underthecrossbones. I shouldn't mix those up. That would be weird. So yeah, find us on Facebook. Chip in. Go, hey, this thing didn't sound right, or that sounded awesome. I want to do that, or whatever you got. All right? So Facebook, Twitter is a good secondary source. Twitter.com/undercrossbones. We're there as well. And if you're listening over on Pirate Radio, the Treasure Coast, welcome to the family. Welcome to the crew. Glad you're here. We're, of course, sponsored by Pirate Radio, the Treasure Coast. WKKC-DB, playing the best music of today's hits and yesterday's classics. And Pirate Radio Talk, playing the best pirate shows, including Under the Crossbones, 24/7, all commercial-free. To listen, go to pirateradio.thetreasurecoast.com or hit the App Store and get the Pirate Radio WKKC-DB app. That is for the music station. And if you want to hear the talk stuff, talkie, pirateradio.tc.com or the Pirate Radio Talk app in your favorite app store. And of course, you can just scream at your Alexa device or your Google device and say, okay, Google, play Pirate Radio, the Treasure Coast, or play Under the Crossbones, or play whatever the heck you wanted to play on there, and it'll do it for you. All brought to you by iTreasure Radio, the very best digital media from independently owned stations at iTreasureRadio.com. I got another little thing here happening. Heard from Jenai Merrick. She got in touch with me last week. You heard Jenai back in episode 128. She's the author of the Gup the Sailor books, and there's a new one coming out soon. We'll talk to her about that in a few weeks. But she's doing a new thing called Pirates in the Park. Now, this is for you Disney fans out there, and I know there's more than a few of you, because if I'm talking to you and you're listening to me, at some point, we're going to talk Disney, right? So, September the 19th, yeah, Talk Like a Pirate Day, Pirates in the Park at the Disney parks. Now, here's what this is. You may have heard of Dapper Days. Dapper Days is a day at the Disney parks once a year when people show up in old-timey fancy dress. And I don't know when that got started or why, but it's a thing. It's called Dapper Days. So Jenai is trying to start a pirate version of that on September the 19th, where pirates invade the Disney parks, dressed as doing Disney bounding. Now, let me explain what that is there for a second, all right? If you don't know what Disney bounding is, go Google Disney bounding. But basically, it's dressing up in regular clothes that are reminiscent of a Disney character. So if you're going to go Minnie Mouse Disney bounding, you might wear like a black top and a polka dot pair of pants or something like that, right? And then you're kind of looking like Minnie Mouse. But this is pirate version of Disney bounding, and so what you're going to do is you dress in pirate garb, but reminiscent of a Disney character. You can't go full Disney character. No Jack Sparrows. Can't do it. You can't do it. This is going to be the only Disney pirate event with no Jack Sparrows because the park gets mad. So anyway, she's got all the rules and the things there. That sounds like it's going to be a really, really fun event. Anyway, that is Pirates in the Park happening September the 19th, 2019 at the Disney parks. To find out more about that, go to facebook.com/DisneyDeckhands. That's facebook.com/DisneyDeckhands. All the information is there. There's some videos. You've got all sorts of good stuff going on. So that is a thing that's happening. Do that up. All right, and that is our show for today. Thank you once again for tuning in. I absolutely appreciate it every single time. If you want to find out more about what Charles Dean Beeker and his students are doing, go to underwaterscience.indiana.edu. Again, that's underwaterscience.indiana.edu. Man, they are working on all sorts of cool stuff. We got some great shows coming up. Next week, we're going to hear from Jasper Rauhorst. He's the co-creator of a video game called Crooked Waters. It's a pirate video game. It's a VR, virtual reality game. It looks really fun, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing about the creation of it. So that is next week with Jasper Rauhorst, which I know I'm mispronouncing his name because he didn't even know how to pronounce it with an English accent. So that's how that works. Week after that, Michael Melzer, author of The Patriot Pirate, a book about Hippolyto Bouchard, will be on the show. We very rarely get any good West Coast pirate stories, right? Hippolyto Bouchard is a pirate/privateer, and that will be part of our discussion in a couple weeks with Michael Melzer. So lots of good stuff coming up, you guys. Make sure to hit the show notes for this episode, underthecrossbones.com/168. And other than that, I'll see you next week. Be good. Don't destroy anything.